Welcome to Brilliant Fools. My name is Adam Green, and today on this Q&A Wednesday, we're going to go over some just questions and answers about the S style of human behavior and what that looks like and how that plays out in different arenas, in the work environment, etc., etc. So, let's get to it. First of all, what are some of the most common fears or stressors of an S style? Because remember, the S style is more steady, stable, sensitive to things around them. They like security. A lot of times, to know what the fears or stressors are, you can just add in before those words. Fears or stressors when I'm in that S style of behavior is going to be insecurity. It's going to be instability. It's going to be people being insensitive. Those can be some of those stressors, especially, and sometimes even fears when I'm really operating in that S style or when the environment feels like it needs more of that S style behavior, depending on what's happening. So also some safety. If something feels unsafe, then that can be a stressor or a fear. And a lot of times that's with good reason. So if you're in, say, a construction environment, you need some of that S style of behavior to keep things safe, just so that the work can continue to go on, right? So that people don't cut themselves and hurt themselves and go crazy. So it can lead to some stress, though, and it can lead to some even fear if things aren't that way in the environment, which is, kind of... Well, it's there. Let's just say that's the way that it is. So moving on, how can S styles balance their desire for that peace, that stability, with the need for honest communication? Stability is not just like safety in the workplace, security as you're moving on kind of deal. Stability is also with those interpersonal relationships. So if I'm living heavily in that S style, then I may not be as willing to approach someone. We have a lot of S style of behavior in the United States, in our country. There's just some good wanting to be sensitive to other people's issues or things that are going on. And that's good. That's nice. That's not a bad thing by any means whatsoever. However, if that prevents me from actually telling someone what they need to hear, then that can be a problem. If I see a ship sailing in the wrong direction, then, what's going to happen? The captain needs to hear, you're going the wrong way, change course immediately. Maybe a stubborn captain, they may not want to hear it. It could be some instability momentarily, but there'll be a lot more instability if the ship hits that rock that he can't see or, runs into whatever issues there are. That's a lot more instability in the future. And that's part of the how. If you're in this S style of behavior, this is how you can identify and move on to make those hard decisions, have those hard conversations. A little bit of discomfort now, a little bit of instability, insecurity, maybe some damage to relationships now. If that's saving someone in the future, that's far more loving, caring, kind, and far more stable and even team-oriented to correct it as soon as possible rather than letting it continue on and then there being much bigger issues later because I didn't respond to them now. So part of that question too, because notice I went both back and forth. So this is how you can address an S person in your organization, in your team, but also it's how you identify it in yourself when you're behaving this way. So part of that self-reflection question is also, what are some things I can do to identify that I'm in this S style of behavior, especially if I'm going too deep into it? Ask some questions. Ask, do I say yes to avoid disappointing other people, even when I shouldn't? Maybe I need to say no because I need to get something done, but I don't want to disappoint people. I don't want to rock the boat, but I should say no. That's common in business owners. I feel like I can't say no to my clients or my customers, my potential customers, so I don't. But I should say no sometimes, or not yet. Do I tend to resist change even when it could be good for me? If I'm heavily resistant to change, I'm probably not very mature when it comes to that S style of behavior. I may be operating in an immature S behavior, especially if that change could be good for me, but I'm just comfortable where I am, if that makes sense, or I don't want to rock the boat too much, so I don't change. How do I respond when someone pressures me to move quickly or aggressively? How stressed do I get, I think, is probably the biggest deal for me. If someone's super aggressive, am I stressed? Or can I move on a little bit easier than that? How long do I stick in that situation? Because someone's aggressive, someone's quick, there's probably going to be some stress that's in there, and that's fine. But do I live in that? And do I just wallow in it, or can I move forward? That indicates how mature I am in that S style of behavior. What do I do when others are in conflict? Excuse me. Do I withdraw? Do I meditate? Not meditate, mediate or meditate. Yeah. Do I withdraw, mediate, or take sides? So meditate, mediate, or take sides. And that's an indication of how I am in that S style of behavior. If I'm taking the side of the person I have a deeper relationship with, just because I have that relationship with them, maybe they're wrong. Maybe I shouldn't take a side, but I do. So what am I doing there? How is that working? Do I withdraw and just remove myself from the situation completely? That could be an indication of immature S-style behavior. However, it could also be just the wise thing to do. If it's two people who are in conflict and they need to work it out amongst themselves, then maybe I should withdraw. So it's not always a bad thing. It's just, is that my staple? Is that my go-to in all situations, even if it shouldn't be? Or am I able to go in and mediate? A good, mature S-style is to be able to mediate, to be able to help resolve the conflict and bring peace among the team members. Do I speak up when I have ideas? Do I stay quiet to keep the peace? And why do I stay quiet? Do I stay quiet because I'm afraid that it won't be well received and people might reject me? Or do I stay quiet because I'm afraid it'll rock the boat? And what if it doesn't work and things are bad? Or do I just speak up and, let us have the conversation and see if it works well and maybe even builds a stronger team? Which brings me to another question. What kind of leadership style, what kind of team leading style and team building style is the S style of behavior? And that really is a bringing people together, resolving conflict. A good mature S style of behavior strives to resolve conflict, bring people together, help everybody see all sides of things, and work and function as a team, as a strong unit together. And S style hates to see people left out or overlooked, especially if they end up having a good idea, or if they're just kind of the weaker person. And a good mature S style can recognize when someone else is operating immaturely in that style and bring them in and help to build them up and build up their confidence to speak up when they do have ideas, and help them to be able to make faster decisions, faster input, without feeling rushed. Just not even, a lot of times, if I'm immature in that S style of behavior, I feel the weight of things more than they actually are. Like I press them down on myself instead of them rolling off my back kind of situation. So there's a lot of good traits from the S style. Loyal, very supportive, patient and consistent, and they're peacemakers when operating in a mature way. When immature, there can be a lot of resistance to change, a lot of fear, fear of conflict, fear of things becoming unstable. There can be passivity. It can really lead to not ever doing anything just because of that fear, not ever going out, not ever moving, not ever making moves. But what are some examples? If I'm going to look at it, especially, let's look at it from a biblical point of view. Where can we see some examples of this S style of behavior, both good and bad, mature and immature? Let's take a mature example. Of course, Jesus, that's a great way, right, to look at it. When he washed the disciples' feet, this was a great thing, a great way to see the S style of behavior, not thinking more highly of himself, like that's just not something I do, but showing what it's like to be a servant leader, modeled it out for them to see. And in fact, his whole ministry was modeling for the disciples what they should do. But he also reiterated constantly about the love they should have for each other. And that's how, he said, that's how they'll know that you're my disciples, is that you love each other. Contrast that with a bad example. Go back to the Old Testament and you see Eli. Okay, so Eli in the Old Testament he was a priest and he had sons that were doing horrible, horrible things. And his passive unwillingness to correct his son's behavior ended up getting him kicked out of his whole lineage kicked out of the priesthood. Basically, they got cut off. His sons died. He died. There were issues. There were major issues there just because he wasn't willing to step up and correct his son's behavior early or later. So that's definitely something that was an issue. Even Samuel fell into that as well, and essentially lost the priestly line as well, because that's when the people stepped up and said, look, we've had enough of this. We want a king. So which kind of had the opposite of the S style of behavior. Another good example, though, is Ruth's loyalty, Ruth and Naomi. So her loyalty to Naomi brought her back to God's people, brought her back to God, and made her part of the lineage of Christ. I mean, that was huge. Ruth and Boaz, when they got together, that was part of the lineage of Christ. So she was grafted into the people of God because of her loyalty to her mother-in-law, Naomi. And she followed her, and that was a great sacrifice to her to have to do that. A bad example, as it relates to Christ again, but a bad example is Pilate washing his hands and saying, look, I'm not going to have anything to do with this. You guys do what you want to do. He didn't want to upset the people or, rock the boat, disturb the peace, so to speak. Even though at that point he knew Jesus was innocent at the very least, if not that there was something else about this man that he needed to pay attention to. But he operated immaturely instead. So another good example, though, also having to do with Christ, is Joseph, Jesus' earthly father, right? The husband of Mary. He supported Mary even when he had every right to divorce her or end the engagement, so to speak, and not marry her. But he supported her. Not only supported her, but they took that trip to Bethlehem. It was a trek and a half to go to Bethlehem while she's pregnant. And that's great support, great personal sacrifice, and really just quiet obedience. So we see some good examples and we see some bad examples. Hopefully this is something we can learn from and take with us and adjust for ourselves. Hopefully you can take this and notice for yourself when you're in the S style in a good way, but also when you're a little more immature and need to adjust as you move forward. Think about it for yourself. Are you in control of your behaviors, or are you letting your behaviors control you? Another way to put that is, are you letting your behaviors define you, or are you defining what your behavior is because you know who you are in Christ? I hope this has been helpful. Join me for the next one. And this week I've been letting you know, greenhouseghs.com. Head over there. I've got some really pushing for some bookkeeping clients, but better bookkeeping that goes beyond the basics and really gets deep into the consulting and even pulls in things like this where it's necessary to be able not just to identify it and where it's affecting your company, but identify what you're going to change and then what do we need to track? What is the bookkeeping aspect of it, the tracking aspect that's important to see if the adjustments that you're making to your behavior are actually producing the results that you're wanting them to produce. So come see me. I hope this has been helpful either way. And until next time, thanks.